Hey everyone. Good
Hello,
evening.
We're live on the internet, folks.
Yay. It must be Monday. So yeah, hey everyone. So today we are continuing with our Grassroots Activism series, and we're exploring in this series the what, the where, the why, and the how of creating effective campaigns, running events, and taking a look at all the different ways that activists can get involved in taking action for our fellow animals. And so we're joined this week by Hannah and Carl, who have got lots to share with us, many different forms of activism. So I'm really looking forward to getting into everything that you guys are involved in, and sort of getting questions from the viewers as well into what goes into organising some of the events, what's it like taking part, etc. So welcome. Thanks for coming on and doing this.
Thank you for having me.
We've got a few people in the house.
Hey.
Codmod, your favourite name, Wendy. I think Michael beat everybody. Hi, Michael. And got Lynn. Hi, Lynn. There's somebody called Ronnie Lee. Not sure who he is. We got the ape. We got the ape arrived again. Jeremy. There's a special thing for you, Jeremy, right at the end of the show. So stick with us. I shall say no more.
Oh, how exciting.
I know, yeah.
So we've got, so Hannah's created an amazing PowerPoint presentation just to show some of the forms of activism. So maybe we want to start with that, and maybe you can talk us through some of this, Hannah and Carl, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the shade of green then, Anna, where did you get that from? No, that's not the first question.
I really like that green.
Yeah, I just wanted to say before I start that obviously we've just picked out the things that we do, and there are so many types of activism, and I think it's important that they all happen, because we never know what is going to change someone. And yeah, the most important thing to me is that we don't criticize each other's activism. I don't think anyone has any business criticizing other people's activism, because we don't know what will change other people. So yeah, that's my main philosophy, is that we all support each other. And obviously you do the things that you think are most effective, and you should obviously do that, but don't criticize, especially publicly, other people.
Yeah, sometimes it feels hard enough just getting out there in the first place. You know, the circles you move in, your friends and family, people at work, you feel like you're already so heavily outnumbered. So why talk yourself out of it, or allow other people to kind of make you start doubting yourself when you've already kind of reached that level where you can suck yourself up and you can take on the unknown. So why start at a disadvantage beforehand?
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's happened a lot to any of your particular actions at all, or just generally? Is that something that you feel happens a lot in the circles that you're in and the activism that you're doing?
Yeah, I think very frequently people are criticizing different organizations online, and the fact is you're never going to like everything about any organization unless it's your own, and then other people won't like something about what you're doing, but all you can do is what you think is best, and just keep doing that, really.
Because we often punish ourselves overly based on conversations we've had, or a certain choice of words, and that's hard enough, wrestling with your own past and how you've been a contributor to this system yourself for most of us, majority of our lives. So that is a massive hurdle in itself, and we should always kind of respect that every other activist has had to surmount that difficulty, that obstacle themselves.
Yeah, and that also there were so few people actually doing activism out of all the vegans out there, that we should not be criticizing anyone that's doing something.
Absolutely.
Do you think that the people criticize are the actual activists on the ground, or the organizations?
It tends to be the organizations, I'd say, but it all has an impact, and it puts people off going to certain things. I just think it's unnecessary. Obviously, do the activism you think is most effective, but there's no need to be criticizing what others are doing.
So you've got some agreement in the comments.
Yeah, I get a lot of love for that perspective. The thing is, it can't be completely across the board, though. Surely, I mean, for example, is it wrong to criticize Peter's sexism, or the fact that they dressed up as the Ku Klux Klan?
Right.
Not long after a black person became the president. So
yeah,
there's got to be some leeway for critique. I suppose it's a question of how it's done. I mean, you were saying not in public, and so I think that was, I think Ronnie said that at one point. It's kind of, we can have a critique in our private groups, but not necessarily in public, maybe.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think something like that probably should be public, because that's a different form of oppression that you're talking about. But that's very different to not liking the way people present their activism. That's they are actively oppressing others.
And it's by no means.
Go ahead, please.
Oh no, so I'm just going to add that, as Roger mentioned with this example of Peter, for someone to critique, and rightly so, those approaches, it's by no means a personal attack on people who came up with it. It's just being responsible and realistic in terms of the global impact that could take, and how people could just shut off from it altogether, because it gives the idea that the activists in that occasion, it may well have been just those whose idea it was, out of touch with reality and perhaps not in a position to engage and like link all these issues in. So if we can kind of look at as I've said, the overall impact, then that's showing responsibility, and you see how it could be perceived from outside. It's not a personal attack on anyone.
I suppose it's getting that balance, isn't it, between sort of assessing and critiquing in a positive, constructive way in order to improve our activism, but not just critique for critique's sake, just because you don't like something or you don't agree with it for just a random sort of personal reason, I suppose.
Right, and a lot of the time it'll be, this organisation's better than that organisation, and it's not a specific attack about something that any organisation's actually done wrong. It's just playing them off against each other, which is completely unhelpful.
That's an interesting one from IC. What is sexist about Peter? I suppose that's a whole other show, isn't it? Going into that. Yeah.
Well, that invokes the difference between second and third wave feminism for a start. So I mean, there is a big argument about the empowerment of women through certain things, or the oppression of women through the exact same thing. It's an argument within the feminist movement, even so.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
To answer the question, I suppose you also have to look at the context. So although, anyone who uses that form of protest has chosen to be there, it's still naive. I'm not suggesting I necessarily is being naive, but it's still naive to ignore that sometimes women are kind of pushed out, or they're not given the same support platform that certain male activists are. And if you take that into consideration at the same time, it does bear on that argument as well. But I can see how you need to be mindful of the fact that women are more often than not commodified in everyday life, and that could be seen as a distraction. It may well appeal to some people. It may well get their attention, and they might start to think about the victims involved, and it's great for them. But we also have to be mindful of the interconnectedness of oppression. And I'm not trying to say that it should be a human rights issue, but that's an argument that some people are going to raise, and we have to be ready to deal with it when it comes up, rather than just saying, oh, it's just about the animals. We have to be kind of experienced and confident enough to talk to those issues, and then obviously draw it back to the trillions of victims, or the individual victim in a farrowing crate.
This observation from Jeremy, I think, is interesting, and it's to speak to what we're talking about, in the sense that if you're thinking about the kind of virtually naked women type protest, I'm not quite sure whether that's stopped. I think they might have done that, but in terms of the Ku Klux Klan one, I think this is interesting, because I think it was the amount of critique they got of it that stopped them repeating it.
But there have been a number of similar things recently. I don't think we should probably go into all of them, but yeah.
If you
look up the protests, there are, aren't there? We looked recently.
You mean the, okay,
yeah. Okay. People are using that same strategy, aren't they? Yeah.
There are a million problems, in my opinion, with PETA, from sexism and racism and the, human rights violations, because some of the products they recommend are connected to human rights violations, to workers' rights violations and things like that. So yeah, it's obviously a completely different topic for another show, but I feel that it's deeply problematic, for example.
Oh, we've got some more shows from the future. That's good.
Actually, let's make notes.
Anna and Carl, we were going to kind of put this point to you, but not as forcefully perhaps as this. But we wanted to kind of get your take on the fact that you obviously are very involved, and that's your first slide in a sense. So you've got this issue. Well, just the issue of the kind of leadership of it versus the on the ground doing of it, and I think there's a bit of a difference between the two, perhaps.
There is a difference, but also a lot of there are often are online, there are a lot of accusations which don't have any real substance behind them, and people just hear one thing and then make their mind up. But yeah, as you say, on the ground, the activists doing it, we're completely separate in many ways. Obviously, we follow the structure, but we're the ones running the events day to day. No one else is.
Yeah, and were you funded from Australia, as it were, or was that?
No, all the funding for all the equipment I have has come from people on the street, activists.
Yeah, so the question that raises in my mind then, aren't the people on the street going, well, where is all that money in Australia going then? I mean, that's the question that follows, surely.
Well, I obviously don't know about the money, so I'm not going to go into that in detail, but clearly there are campaign costs and other things which are to do with the overall running of the organisation.
I think a lot of the time, if people start, insinuating, that we've been paid to be there and that we have some ulterior motive, they're coming from a place of dishonesty. They're not really willing to engage with the message we're putting out there and the footage. They're just looking for anything but holding themselves accountable, and that's for them is perhaps a more sophisticated way of doing that. But you can't, if you go to an event like that and you're talking about what people are wearing or how the mining involved to produce minerals for the screens, you've clearly you made your mind up beforehand.
Yeah.
I guess the question with AV, because I personally had the dilemma because I was an organizer for the Athens chapter. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that there was never a problem with the other activists on the ground. No one was sexist, no one was racist. There haven't been weird incidents or anything. But the consensus back then, because we had to discuss it as a team, and that team was 300 people, that the majority was worried that maybe some of the things that the leadership doesn't say will reflect badly on the independent activists and will make people from minorities think that the actual activists believe in these things. So it was kind of a vote that took place, and back then we decided to leave AV and create something similar without the logo. Are you worried about this?
Yeah, but I think the problem is, whatever organisation it is, there will be things that come up that people don't like, and then there will be people who try to move away from it. And to me, AV is what I started doing. It's the first activism I did. I fully believe it's the most effective activism of its kind in terms of speaking to the public about veganism generally, about all oppression against non-human animals. And to me, just because there are one or two things which people may or may not have said, that is not a reason to stop doing what I believe to be the most effective. I like it because, everybody is on the same page. There is a lot of activism you do that everybody will be doing their own thing, and that's fine at certain types of things. But for me, for this to be effective, everyone needs to be on the same page, have the same rules, and be there for the same reason.
So do you think so for you, Hannah, say comparing AV to something like Earthling's experience, which is a little bit more, it's more laid back, there's no structure, there's no set dress code or anything like that. Do you think that AV is more effective because of that, because of the structure, because of the almost uniform look, the almost not that, I mean, I know AV sometimes like give almost scripted points, but I think activists on the ground do have their own free conversations, don't they? But do you think that's why, in your opinion, that it does feel more effective? And if you do you think the conversations are similar or different then in those two?
I would say different. I mean, I'm not here to criticize other organizations, and I think that different things appeal to different activists and different things appeal to different people who would see what's going on the street. So we do need both types of thing. But at the same time, for me, I like things to have a structure, and I think it looks professional, and that you get a lot of activists that will only do that because it looks professional, and they wouldn't do Earthlings, and obviously vice versa. But
yeah, I've heard activists say those exact things. Actually, I like having the structure, I like the dramatic effect, the black, the formation, the mask, everything like that, and the fact that people are do know what they're doing, and obviously it's such a well publicized organization, isn't it, that there's that goes with it as well.
And with the big screens that we have, you see people seeing what we're doing from halfway down the street. Even if they don't stop and talk to us, they know what we're doing and they see the truth.
And then some people have said, like the opposite, like with Earthlings, I like the fact we're a bit more free and we don't have to follow so many rules. So I guess it is there is personality, like you said, attracts different activists, attracts different paper. And I think perhaps like even with this people walking in the street, some people are going to be really put off and think, oh God, that looks a little bit daunting, I'm not going to go. And some people are going to be really drawn to whatever it is, aren't they? So different strokes, I suppose.
Definitely need both.
This is one of Ronnie's long-term concerns about kind of big things, kind of sucking people into the big cities, because Ronnie's sorry,
that's not really right, because I run 4 chapters. It used to be 6, but I had to cut down, and none of them are in the centre.
Well, that's great.
They're all in the outskirts.
And if things are still the same, no matter where you live, you can start a chapter.
Right, you can
even if it's a village or
I think Ronnie's point is, though, I suppose if people are attracted, especially I think activists, some people are attracted to like the bigger groups because there's that camaraderie, there's going and mixing, and then there's maybe that the little social afterwards where people just get together after the activism. So maybe people are drawn more to like the bigger events, and maybe I think Ronnie's point would be there'll be less organisers wanting to set up their own smaller groups in smaller places because people are drawn more to the bigger events.
Well, I think if you get out there and get to know people see you're committed, you get more people who will come and support your events wherever you're doing them. And that's definitely the case with the things we do, that people travel much further out of the centre to come to events because they know what they're about and they're prepared to do it.
I think it's also interesting to remember that if you are a passerby and you just see 2 people there, one with a screen and the other person doing outreach, I mean, ideally we would like to have many more people at each event, but you kind of you respect them a bit more in a way. You respect them for taking a stand when they're so clearly outnumbered, and that almost is more striking in the sense that they are so kind of easily overlooked and so such a daunting prospect that they've undertaken have still gone ahead. So I think having just small people, I mean, I've seen on the AV site, you see all these different chapters in far-flung places with hardly anyone there. I've seen photos of people in Uganda and I bring that up because people often saying, oh, well, it's a privilege to be vegan and you have to be from a certain demographic. And you've got people with, excuse the expression, not a pot to piss in sometimes. I'm not aiming at them directly, but they still just stand there and they've got their makeshift sign, they've daubed some words on it, and sometimes they've got a screen, they're just standing staunch and they're there to kind of put the message out there to anyone who's open enough to listen. And then I think that can kind of gain momentum. I mean, you can have one person who stands on their own to do something, then the other person in many ways is kind of encouraging everyone else to get involved because they see that this one person alone isn't just some wacko. There's someone who actually kind of has something worth saying, and the fact that you've joined them means that others are going to look at you and think, oh well, someone else must believe in that cause, and then it gathers momentum. But yeah, something to be said for those small groups of people in the corner of corner of nowhere.
Yeah, completely. I think a lot of the time people use it as an excuse that there aren't many people in their area, or it's just a bit too difficult because no one will come. And the fact is, if there are two of you, you can get out there and do it. And if you do, more people will join.
I was just going to say, Jeremy's in the chat and he does a lot of solo activism, and actually he's written the message there. He does solo outreach, and people find it less intimidating because he's on his own, and it's just like a one-to-one conversation. So
I used to see live posts from Michael Green. He would incorporate his artwork. He'd be down on the beach and he has some brilliant, insightful artwork with the messages that you'd often see in his t-shirts and stuff as well, and that would draw people in. And as you know, I'm sure you probably will met Michael Green, you know that he was able to back that up with his own kind of personal input on it, and that was a shining example of how one person can make that difference.
Well, my strategy for if you haven't got many people, then get Elvis involved. That
Yes, I don't know if Anna and Carl have seen that, but often when Roger and Jennifer are out doing their outreach in Dublin, they have an Elvis helper giving out vegan cheese. It's quite hilarious to watch.
So should we move on, people?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Hannah, this was a big one for you, wasn't it? For you and Carl together.
It was big. I'm not sure I've recovered yet. It was a huge amount. And
even the pictures from this event are so powerful.
Yeah,
I can only imagine how it would feel to be there, but that was I assume that it attracted a lot of attention.
Yes, that was my hope, that it would be impactful, and I put a lot of time into thinking about how everything would look to make sure that the pictures would convey exactly what we were wanting it to.
Hannah, can I just ask before you kind of tell us more about it, what actually was your inspiration to actually create something like this and something completely new from scratch?
It's a bit of a long story. It wasn't completely new because, as a lot of people will know, there's the National Animal Rights Day that does something very similar. And originally I was going to be organising that, but then there was an issue where non-vegans were allowed to hold the animals and the placards. And to me, that is completely disrespectful. And you wouldn't allow that with any other form of oppression. And they were quite insistent on it. So I ended up thinking, well, I've done most of this organising now. What will I do? And I just decided to set up my own thing. That was it, really.
That's really interesting, because we often talk about that, don't we? Like collaborations, and should we, when we're running campaigns and events, should we kind of stand with non-vegans? And we often have that conversation. And then how does it run when the press get involved? And do you have like a non-vegan speaking out for this issue? And it's a really interesting one, actually. It's interesting to see that had that catalytic effect for you.
I think it's an issue generally, but with something like this, to me, it would be completely disrespectful to have a funeral service with non-vegans representing those who they are still oppressing.
Yeah, I completely agree. It would be very weird and disrespectful.
Yeah,
and I think
very, very strange.
The feeling might be different because obviously the people holding the animals felt like deep respect and love for these individuals, and a non-vegan would not feel the same.
Right. And
so the same action is different done by different people.
Yeah, and I wanted even the people holding the placards to feel that too. I mean, we had 60 different species represented, and I tried to, make sure everyone was represented as much as possible.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
I mean, non-vegans were welcome to kind of attend and observe, because it's such a emphatic, powerful event. But yeah, there has to be that line, because he's a human parallel. You wouldn't have child abusers speaking up on behalf of NSPCC. You wouldn't have rapists advocating for women's rights, and some may balk at that and may feel uncomfortable because it's not really something they want to bring up in public, but it's the consistency. Whether you see, obviously society views one form of oppression as different to another, but as far as the victim's concerned, it's still showing that callousness towards them.
Yeah. How it felt emotionally wise for the activists that were there, because I haven't done something similar, and I imagine it's not an easy thing to do. It must be very emotional and even painful to hold the bodies of these individuals.
Well, it was
for the reverence and the atmosphere, I don't know, making you feeling different.
It was a very emotional event generally, but it was obviously extra emotional for us because of what you going.
Well, yeah, so I mean, you can probably see in the picture there, I mean, that's a dog, not just any dog. That was Beaker, a dog I adopted in Spain back in 2015, and she was, when I adopted her, they estimated she was 9. She was getting on, and I was lucky enough to have about 5.5 years with her. But you know, when I was with her every day of that time, I was thinking, just imagining what it'd be like to lose her, just thinking of how much time's left. And then suddenly, before the event, days before the event, she had a seizure, and it was just, she already had a tumor growing behind her eye, which we'd had to have removed. But the passing was very kind of violent and disturbing.
It was very difficult.
Yeah, and I thought that I would never. I might possibly regret not trying to incorporate her story into the event. And
then I had to read that story out, and obviously I've known her a lot less time than Carl has, but you know how it is with all non-human animals, that as soon as they're in your lives, you love them. And it was probably about 10 months maybe that I know her, and yeah, it was horrible to read about her like that. It was difficult, I should say. Yeah, difficult. But yeah, obviously, so it was more emotional for us, but I think it was emotional for everyone, because these are the victims that we fight for. This is the reason we do it.
Yeah, I'll vouch for that, because I was there as well. And
how did you find it, Wendy?
Really powerful. And actually, I'd been a person, because I know, Hannah, you'd asked me about whether I wanted to hold an individual, and one of the reasons that I thought I don't think I can, I thought that I would be too emotional. I thought having that individual, because I'm very sensitive anyway to footage, to anything like that, and to have a real person in my arms who had died, I was thinking, I don't know if I'll be able to hold myself together. But actually, when I was there, and I think sometimes when you are at events, you do something with your emotions, and I can't quite work out what happens, but you do something in order to be able to get through, and you just find this resilience. And at the time, I remember thinking, actually, I think I would have found it very powerful to hold and actually give so much respect in that moment, because that's how it felt. It didn't feel, because I know someone's asked in the, I think it was Bernie V, said, wouldn't the placards have been enough? And without the bodies, and I'd thought that same thing. Are we being disrespectful when we do this in our activism? What's, not that I didn't support it, because like you said in the beginning, it's not that we want to criticize, but just for myself, I was thinking, is this right? Does this sit with me? But actually, when I was there, it just felt so respectful. There was so much, every single one of the activists holding the individuals and the placards just felt so much respect. And it wasn't in a way of like, oh, these are props. It didn't feel like that. They were not props. They were really representing everything that we stand for, I suppose. And in a way, it was like when Carol Adams talks about the absent referent, it was almost like they were there with us. They weren't absent at all, and they were real.
Basically that way as a funeral service for them. And the very similar feedback to what you've just said from a number of people who thought that they wouldn't be able to do it, and they wanted to, and they wished that they had when they were there. Yeah. And as you said, it was respectful, and I'd made very clear rules on what was expected, as you saw, because I sent it out to everybody who participated, that there were expectations about your behaviour, and whether you were holding an animal or a placard, that was your individual to represent on that day. and you don't share them around, and you just represent that one individual.
I had a stag beetle, and there was a stag beetle in my garden yesterday, and I was just like, they're incredible. I just thought I'd share that.
They are.
This happened in a very public place. It was the Parliament Square, wasn't it? So was it covered by mainstream media? And what kind of reactions did you have from non-vegans, bypassers?
So yeah, there were quite a few photographers who attended. Some who hadn't been contacted.
I contacted hundreds. So.
yeah, that's true. But you did put in the work there. There were quite a few. There was a vegan one, quite well-known vegan photographer, and some of the others who attend our events on a weekly basis.
Yeah, the ones that were actually there to represent us. Yeah. And as you said, the vegan photographer had contacted me in advance because he appreciated the stance I took on not allowing non-vegans, and so he actually volunteered to come and cover it for us.
And
I'm not sure which. I think some of those photos are his. Yeah.
And as far as the public concerned, it was quite a busy road passing in front of us, and you still get lots of people stopping and just kind of not knowing what to make of it. And they seemed moved. It's quite harder to be as dismissive as some people might be with certain earthlings or AV actions, when you've actually got what was someone there in your arms, and like the whole tone, the atmosphere, the speech that Hannah kind of put so much work into, and all those elements there made it kind of something that commanded people's attention. I mean, there was just one instance of someone who was perhaps unstable making a beeline for Hannah while she was mid-speech,
and that put me off a little bit.
Yeah, that got a bit worrying. He was getting angry.
No one seemed to be stopping him.
No, one of the photographers.
I had to get ready.
There was only one of the photographers who kind of pushed him away, and that's only then did the police decide to actually take action. And they were more kind of on the photographer's case, saying, "Oh, don't get involved. That's our job." But,
they weren't doing anything, and he was coming at me.
Yeah.
I was a bit worried when I saw him coming up. I was thinking, "Oh my God, what is he going to do?" It was a bit like heart-stopping moment.
Groundskeeper Willie. That's how I remember him.
But I do remember it was difficult. Obviously, I was at the front. I couldn't see anything behind me. But you could definitely see a lot of people were stopping and listening, and I saw people filming. And going back to, because you mentioned the speech, it wasn't just this event that you see here. We had so many speeches afterwards, and I think they were, in terms of talking about non-vegans, we obviously wanted non-vegans to attend and to hear those speeches and to see why they should be vegan. So this was only half of the event, really.
Is this an annual event? In the sense, it's something you are planning to repeat next year? Because most of our viewers are from the UK, so.
Yes, it will be annual. There was also another event in Liverpool. I don't know how many people saw that, but it's all the photos are on the We Stand For The Animals Facebook page. So the Liverpool event was covered. I've already got two. I haven't put a call out yet, but I will be doing for more people to organise around the country. But I've already had 2 people contact me and ask if they can do different locations. So hopefully we've got at least 4 locations for next year already.
How long did it was the plan? How much planning was involved in this, Hannah? Because I imagine, I mean, there were, I think was it kind of, was it 9 by 9? It was a lot of us. There were 9 rows of 9 people, weren't there? So there were a lot of placards.
Yeah, so there were 85, including the people holding the banner, and then obviously all the speakers, and it was just I think it'll be easier next year, but it was starting from scratch. I mean, I had nothing. I had to get someone to make the logo, to make the t-shirts, pick all the images for the placards, get those made. Everything was from scratch, but next year should be a bit easier.
I was interested in Carl's report about the public, because if you put these images on TikTok, you get loads of bacon comments and that kind of stuff. And so I suppose that kind of goes to show the difference between how people behave in real life and on social media in some sense. But in terms of the the kind of movement critique, Anna, I'm sure you must have expected the props thing, which Wendy kind of brought up. So you'd probably be aware that there is opposition to that. And that happened to Animal Equality, because they did one of these in Madrid. I think it was about 2012. And And so there's a lot of kind of pushback on that. So how would you answer the props argument?
I mean, when I first saw the National Animal Rights Day protest a few years ago, my initial reaction was that, oh yeah, perhaps that is distasteful, and they're using those animals, and they don't have to do that. I mean, as I'm sure a lot of people have said today. But then when you're actually there, if you see that animal as a prop, I would argue that perhaps that you're bringing something to bear on that. So if you can only if your view of them is limited to seeing them as an object being used, maybe you're just like maybe you're seeing them as not as they should be seen. I'm not particularly
no,
well.
I know what you mean.
If it was a human situation, if it was obviously it wouldn't be necessarily on the same scale, but we would see them and try and empathize and put ourselves in the positions of those who are grieving, as I think Jeremy said beforehand, it's anticipatory grief, and those who are kind of totally invested in that moment. And just to see them as a prop seems to me quite cynical, and that's from someone who kind of shared that view beforehand.
Yeah, and I mean it's intended as a funeral service for them, and yes, you can see them, but in many cultures we have open coffin funerals, and that's just a cultural difference. So I don't think the fact that they're not human should make a difference.
I can see why people would react that way, because they're so often surrounded by what they see or who they see as someone in supermarkets, and so much is done to trivialize animal bodies. But we know as activists, as we like to think of ourselves as animal lovers, who that was, and maybe we should just kind of err on the side of compassion, or where that person is coming from who's decided to present the animal and present them, or kind of give them that spotlight that they deserve, if you like, attention. Maybe that's coming from a place of sincerity and not just a cheap gimmick, because that couldn't be further from the truth. I can see how some people might see it that way, but I know that's not the case. I never would have. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, Carl, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I suppose it's like we mentioned earlier about other activism, it's a contextual thing as well. We maybe have to assess things within the context of the way it's done, the intention behind it, the setting. It's not just a blanket rule like we should never do this or we should always do this. It's like looking at things case by case and assessing things, in more of the context in which it's done, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been at an animal rights march in London, and someone just decided to rock up with a dead chicken. And funnily enough, Michael Green again was the one who kind of told her straight that, like, the way it was just distasteful. It was like that was like a prop. Yeah, it was like they just bought a rubber chicken in a shop, and where they were holding them, and that would definitely support that point you made, Wendy, that it's not the context, right?
I think the next slide is another one of the same, isn't it? Or is it?
No. So this is the fur protest that we have recently started. For a long time, Moncler have not had an ongoing protest, and they're one of the few left to commit to dropping the fur. So this is what we're doing once a week now. So
is that a London shop? Is it a London shop? Yeah.
Yeah, it's worldwide, but there's one in London. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because we all. I thought that Harrods was the only one selling fur now.
Oh no, there's still a lot, but this is an actual brand's own shop, so they're one of the.
Yeah, it's on Old Bond Street, quite near Green Park Station, and it's seen as quite an affluent part of town. You've got lots of high-end brands there, like another fur, Dolce and Gabbana is just a few doors down. I think Max Mara stopped, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's just those two left now that haven't. Obviously, Canada Goose have committed to drop it, but they haven't yet, so they're still selling fur now. But Moncler and Dolce and Gabbana are the two brands that have not committed to drop it. So we're outside Moncler once a week now.
Who's your friend? Sorry.
I just want to ask: do you get non-vegans joining you in the fair protest? And what kind of problems arise or do not arise?
Sorry, say that again.
And what kind of problems arise if they do or they do not arise?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any non-vegans that have attended. It's very difficult to know with something like this. I mean, you put an event where people just turn up, and that's the case with something like this. But yeah, I've written a speech that I'm reading outside there, and we clearly talk about all the animals that are used, not just the fur. So it should be quite clear to anyone that came along that we're against all animal oppression. Because
fair protests are often critiqued for that, but in my experience, I was never at the fair protest where non-vegans joined. It doesn't happen to me. And I think the most important thing is how you frame it.
Yes, completely. We put it as an anti-speciesist action, and we talk about all forms of oppression, don't we? And
absolutely. It is the low-hanging fruit almost, because, as I'm sure you're aware, most non-vegans find fur detestable, but they draw a convenient line between that and other forms of exploitation. So we do kind of just see it as a way in, and then we just expand on that to down and wool, and then we look at how these aren't byproducts, and we look at all the other industries and just go from there, really. I mean, I don't see why there's any more reason why we can't do it with fur and expand than we can with animals being consumed. I know kind of maybe symbolically people say, well, you're consuming that whole animal, but to the victim it doesn't matter why they're being used, and that's what the point we try and get across.
And the thing is, I mean, sorry, Wendy, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Nella. You finishing.
I just want to say that some kinds of actions may be criticized as speciesist, but the thing is that you have to frame them in a specific way, and then you have the same activists doing different protests. So it's not really speciesist, because you have the same persons doing fair protests and protests against breeding, the breeding of animals for food, and protests against vivisection. So the fact that these are single issue campaigns does not make them speciesist.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I was just going to ask, like, building on this whole framing it that Nella's talking about, and that you've mentioned there, Hannah and Carl, about sort of talking about it as an anti-speciesist action. How do you, so for anyone who might think about setting something like this up where they are in their area, how can we abolitionize and make this into an anti-speciesist event rather than, you know, just like a single issue campaign sort of thing? How have you framed it? What kind of strategies have you used for that?
I think it's just about talking about everything. People know we're there because this shop has fur, but you still use that platform to discuss every form of oppression. And you can, if you look on the We Stand for the Animals site, you can see this. Someone recorded the speech that I've written there, that we're talking about all the animals that they are using. And it's not a single issue really at all.
Yeah, we expressly highlight the inconsistency of just focusing on these so-called more terrible issues with dog fighting, the obvious ones like dog fighting and fur, and those that people say, oh, it's far worse. We draw a line under that and say that there's no way you can put one in a different category.
Yeah, and also if someone's standing in front of you oppressing one being, you will talk about that. And it doesn't mean you don't care about all the others. And it's the same with the fur shops. You're standing outside a fur shop, so you talk about the fur, but it doesn't mean you don't care about all the other animals.
Sometimes I think, sorry to interrupt, it's just a case that people they don't want to get behind a certain action. So it's not always the case. I'm not trying to, attack anyone, but sometimes they don't want to do anything themselves. So they'll rather just pull down those who are trying to stand up. And I understand the difference between kind of critiquing and criticizing, but if you're offering advice as to why not expand the outreach to this and cover these different topics, then fair enough. But if they actually spent the time listening to what goes on in a protest, they would see that this is just a way in, as I said earlier, as it is with any other type of event like Earthlings or AV.
Plus, you can always find something that suits you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I just wanted to. This has kind of come up a couple of times in the conversation. Actually, and I think El Vegan and Ronnie have both sort of commented on this issue. And someone else, I think, talking about when we mentioned it, when if non-vegans are coming into the protests, and we were saying like very rarely we're not aware of non-vegans being in the protests. And then El Vegan was saying in their protests that they do get non-vegans infiltrating. And then Ronnie said that, where's Ronnie's? He was at a fur protest where non-vegan wildlife campaigner, that's the one, wanted to take part. Some of the vegans told him to fuck off, which I think was a mistake. How do you both feel about having non-vegans say if they wanted to come and help with the fur protest, if they wanted to get involved in that? And I think at the moment down at Camp Beagle, for example, I think there are a lot of locals there who are probably not vegan, camping alongside animal rights activists and vegans to save the beetles. So what's your view on collaborating?
I think if it was a fur protest, first of all, we'd ask them quite obviously not to wear any animal body parts to the demo itself, and we see it also as an opportunity to outreach them before and after, and just kind of ask them what it is that's stop them, and if they feel passionately enough to turn up to that demo, why don't they just follow that consistently? So there are plenty of opportunities there, but it's just sensible. It's a sensible approach where they wouldn't actually be wearing animal skins and fur, obviously not fur for anyone.
Well, that's where Francione is completely out of date when he critiques this particular single issue. What about?
Did you just say Francione then, just Roger?
No, Francione. I did Francione. What do you think of this one from Deb, Carl, and Anna? In the sense that this is invoking the cranky vegan kind of idea.
We're talking about different things here. I mean, in terms of things like AV, where we do outreach, absolutely, you have to be vegan. You can't take part at all if you're not vegan, because you're there speaking up for the animals. Fur protests, as I said, you put the advert on, anyone can turn up. You don't know who the people are. It's not an easy thing to police. But anyone who came along who I didn't know, I would ask them who they were, obviously politely, and discuss with them. And if they weren't vegan, I would be speaking to them every single time about that, because it would be an opportunity to outreach them as in the same way as it would be at a normal outreach event. But in terms of any event where someone is speaking for the animals, I don't think you can have non-vegans.
And if it's a fur protest where they just turn up, I guess the default, the assumption is that they are vegan, and then when it comes to light that they're not, you kind of seem surprised. You're not going to be kind of chasing down the street, but you're going to be surprised. Oh, why are you here then? Just and not necessarily trying to catch them out. Just the onus should be on them to explain why that they feel that they can abuse these animals but still speak up for another group.
Yeah, and it's a practical thing as well. Let's be honest, it's not like an AV event. You're there on the street shouting, we're here with the megaphones doing our chants, and someone else joins in on the line. What are we supposed to stop and go and find out who they are? It's quite a difficult thing to manage in that sense.
Have you had to turn away any people from AV events then, Anna, because of that policy?
Yeah.
Yeah, because carry on, sorry.
I mean, it's rare, because the normal process is they contact you. They apply to join the specific chapter group. They answer 3 questions, including why are you vegan? And no matter what they say, I will send them a message showing them what they need to watch beforehand and making sure that we're all on the same page. And then you have 3 sessions before you actually do any outreach yourself. So it's a completely different process where you would know exactly who you've got there.
Interesting, yeah, because some French people came up to our stall in Dublin, must be about 4 years ago, and said that amongst French students, it's become fashionable for them to join AV with the masks and be the one holding the laptops, even though they weren't vegan. It was a kind of
it's difficult to talk about what was going on there, but that's certainly shouldn't be happening. There's a definite process.
it didn't happen here either. It was not possible to join. I think that at some point, for vegetarians, you could ask them, you could let them join for 3 times, but not without doing any outreach.
That's been for a long time. That doesn't exist. You have to be.
Yeah, it's a long time, but everyone else was vegan.
Yeah.
I see we're saying Cranky Vegan, I don't know if you can bring this one up, Roger, at 648. Cranky Vegan has completely evidence-free beliefs about non-vegan activists getting converted into vegan activists. Like an environmental protest, it happens so barely. And I don't know about that now so much. I know I was an activist before I was a vegan, because the vegan movement didn't really exist. It was an animal rights movement, and veganism became kind of something that I became more aware of as I got deeper into animal rights. So for me, it was that way round. But I know now, because of the growth of veganism and the vegan movement and the outreach, it tends to be the other way around a lot more now. You become a vegan and then an activist. But
it's a different world now, and everyone knows what vegan is. It's not the same scenario.
I don't know how often it happens, but I know people that came to veganism through other kinds of activism, human rights or environment. So these people exist. I don't know how many they are, and I don't know if we have a way to find out. But.
Yeah, as far as human rights goes, that's understandable, because it is about the oppressor and the systematic violence being exerted, and I think that makes more sense when you're looking at it from environment and health perspective. It's ultimately how it benefits the oppressor, and then we wouldn't take that stance if it was a human on human action taking place. You wouldn't. I mean, this is just kind of idea I got from maybe if someone was a rapist, you know, your main contention, your main point to make to them, if they confided that in you, is not that it could damage their health, they might catch venereal disease. It would be your victim is someone, you're destroying their life. And if you're looking primarily at the environment and health, then you are kind of doing just that. You're ignoring the impact on that one individual, because I could argue that, well, I don't eat animals, I don't wear them, but I do occasionally like to go and watch some dog fighting or go to SeaWorld, but I still grow all my crops at home, so I'm having a much reduced carbon footprint than the average vegan, and that would be perfectly accurate. It might be very rare, but you have to kind of pursue these arguments to those extremes to see whether they actually hold water or not.
Yeah, we were having a bit of a conversation the other day about trying to switch things around into a human context. And when you do start to look at things, or even say some of the pro-vegan arguments for environment, for health, if you say them and kind of put them in a human context, it's actually quite ludicrous. We were kind of doing a little bit of that the other day, and
exactly. And if you can do that, if you can say something is okay for animals that you wouldn't say for humans, then you're still speciesist. Call yourself a vegan if you like, but if you're still being speciesist, then you shouldn't be. You can't be using those ideas.
I think it's mature and realistic to embrace how deeply ingrained it is in us. I mean, in the way we react to certain less species who are less cute, who might make us flinch initially. We still have that speciesist approach. It's in our language, and then sometimes fellow activist friends pull us up on it, and then we should be humble enough to look at the source of that and the harm it can do when we spread those ideas. Even if it's casual speciesism, it's still coming from that ugly place.
But yeah, we should definitely be pulling each other up on it all the time, and it is something that definitely needs dealing with, because so many people still refer to animals as it, and it's just terrible.
You're speaking our language on this show. Yeah, it really grates it, and the more you challenge your own language, the more it grates you when you hear others using it, especially ones who are advocating for other animals. It does really start to grate you.
So I guess we should move on. Time has flown past so far. It's an hour in already.
The whistle stopped through the other ones then.
Brian does agree, Jeremy. You're absolutely right. He will not be called it.
No.
And rightly so, oh boy.
So where is this? Obviously, it's a vivisection campaign, anti-vivisection campaign.
Yeah, so the one at the top there is in Camden, and the other ones are outside Imperial College. We don't organise these generally, although the one at the bottom we organised as a one-off because someone else couldn't do it. But yeah, it's just the importance of having actions against vivisection, really. We've just tried to put together all the things that we do and we feel passionate about, and this is one of them.
Do you think there's a lack of knowledge in the movement about vivisection at the moment?
Definitely. I think even until, what was it, last week or the week before we did this, I definitely educated myself in order to write a speech, and now I think everyone should do that. Yeah, I think we don't know as much about vivisection as we do about many of the other forms of oppression, and we should.
Yeah,
it's quite. Oh, sorry, Carl. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just one point about how it's that area where there are more variations in the forms of abuse, use, and abuse than I would say any other area. I mean, the numbers might not stack up as much as animals being eaten, but in terms of just human ingenuity being kind of inverted to be like the distorted version of the brilliant thing it could be, it's manifested there in vivisection. It's like I mean, it's always evil and cowardly to use someone who, you know, this whole might makes right mentality, but with vivisection, it's just it goes to places that only the human mind could go.
Yeah, some of the things they invent, you can't even imagine how they came up with them.
Mm.
No, I was just going to say, it's interesting how I think sort of animal testing and research and anti-vivisection is having a resurgence at the moment, especially given the kind of growth of Camp Beagle, and it's brilliant because, and that's how I got into the movement. And it used to be very, very predominant in the movement. So a lot of it was anti-vivisection, anti-fur. And then after kind of Shack and all of that was going on in the 90s, it seemed to go underground. And then it was like the flourishing of the vegan movement and sort of outreach for other animals being exploited in the kind of for consumption and all that. So it's good to see this resurgence and that more and more activists are starting to learn about it, and there are more events. There just seems to be a lot more presence of kind of anti testing and research going on now. It's brilliant.
This is one interesting one from Jeremy, Anna and Carl. You talked about doing research. Was that in the nature of scientific anti-vivisection, which is what Jeremy's getting at, or was it just on the moral point?
I mean, it's just in terms of knowing what's going on, because you should know. But I wrote a speech for that as well, which is recorded if you wish to listen to it. But the majority of what you're saying, whatever action you're doing, you're saying the same things, because it's an appeal to the emotion and you're speaking up for the victims in the same way. But it's obviously good to know some of the facts about the specific thing that you are talking about. But yeah, I mean, it all comes down to speciesism at the end of the day, and that should be the basis of all the things that have been said. Yeah,
ironically, the vivisectors would play the emotion card. They would say it's your baby or this mouse, when that's a very misleading argument to make. And I think it's one of those areas where we can't afford to ignore what, say, like Animal Free Research UK and the American Anti-Vivisection Society, who are made up of many non-vegans, would argue that it's damaging and misleading, unreliable, but also bring it back to how we're putting the human being as like the finest example of creation.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Should do this in a minute or so, shouldn't we? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a small matter.
Yeah, I'm sure most people are aware now what these kind of actions are. And to me, they are probably one of the more important actions that are happening. I think when we look back, we'll say look at all the people that went into those places and expose them for what they really are. And yes, we have videos that do that, but when it's someone going in and showing you now what is happening, I think that is one of the most impactful things that there can be, really.
Yeah, it's an act of solidarity, because if it were Romanian orphans decades ago, people would go in there and they might not necessarily have been able to kind of change things there and then, but they knew that the world needed to see it. And although that may have been kind of more of an isolated case, some may have argued, it's still pressing. And your friends and family, people work with, will see that you've given up time and put yourself at, as with a lot of the activists on Saturday, at considerable risk of physical harm to do that. And that speaks volumes, not to mention the images themselves, and just looking at the expressions on those pigs' faces, for example.
Yeah.
And also because now it has happened in so many countries.
Yeah.
It's a way to deal with it doesn't happen here excuse, right. Objection. So that is a universal thing.
Right. And often, like the place we went to this time, what we're showing is standard. And people like to kid themselves that standard is humane, or it certainly doesn't look like the images that we're showing. So I think it is very helpful to show the truth of what's happening down the road to people sometimes.
We're always mindful of language on this show. So, I mean, I like the title, and in fact, I did the press on the Irish, the Southern Irish one, Republic of Ireland, and there's only been one there. Mm-hmm. But I was always struck by the language. It's interesting, meet the victims with a double E would almost be more powerful, wouldn't it? In the sense that, Reagan always said, you wouldn't do this to me if you knew me. So meet in that sense. I mean, I know the play on words, but I just wonder
the play on words is important, and I think using the meet that we're talking about in terms of the victims is powerful, because most people will see that and it will make them think. Whereas if it's just said meet, as in meet and greet, then they probably wouldn't notice. I don't think it would have the same impact at all.
Also,
so
they know
like it's just a transbreaker, isn't it?
So no, I'd be tempted to have some people with this and some people with double E. That might work.
Yeah. Well.
I don't know. I feel that this one is effective because people seeing this, they immediately know which victims are you referring to.
Right. Exactly.
Or they just think that you can't spell. There's that. No, it does. It's a transbreaker, isn't it? Because it's not what you expect to see. If you see meat with double E, you'd expect to see that. Whereas this is like, it's like you do a double take and you think, why is it?
People wake up.
It's not that way.
Yeah, it makes them sit up. And
how was the action interpreted by journalists or the public? Did they think that this was a bad farmer, or it was framed in a way that made clear that this is the standard? It's not.
I'm not really sure, to be honest. I mean, this one only happened on Saturday, and I haven't had too much chance to recover from it yet. But
yeah. And because I know, Hannah, you've done one of these before, or a couple before. Yeah. One wasn't Meet the Victims, but generally, how like just in the way that Nella just asked, how are they received afterwards? And do you think, because what concerns me with the framing of these is that they're framed, or that people will receive them in a welfareist way, in that, okay, we're exposing the conditions, and so the public will be like, oh yeah, that we really need to sort this out and we need a better way of doing this. How have they been framed generally in the past, and how do you think this one will be framed in terms of putting it out to the public?
Yeah, I think that even the name itself shows it's about the victims, and no matter how they're being treated, that they are still victims. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think it's important that when you're putting your images up and talking about it, that you are showing that this is what's happening everywhere. There's no good way to do it. There's no right way to do a wrong thing. It is, you're exposing the particular conditions on that farm, but if you go to a different farm down the road, it's going to be the same.
Yeah, the difficulty is the claims making. Some Meet the Victims events sadly have kind of gone for the one bad apple type. We've never seen conditions as bad as this type thing. Whereas, you know, the claim would be, as you just put it there, well, you can just go down the road, it will be the same. That would be the stronger claim, I would think.
Yeah,
I guess some of them are going to be the very terrible farms, and the fact that they're treated slightly better down the road obviously doesn't make it okay. But yeah, some of them are going to be particularly horrific. But that's just the nature of it, isn't it?
Here's an advert for Vegan Pixie Warrior. So effectively that means we've got to get off in 20 minutes. That's what she's saying there.
All right, should we move on then to the next one?
There was 2 questions about whether the farmer's being charged. Do you want to address that, or do you want to not? Or?
I don't actually know. I know that he was kept in for a long time, and I'd be very surprised if he wasn't given large amounts of evidence, recorded evidence, but we'll just have to wait and see, won't we?
So I've heard of this. What's it all about?
You want to have a go?
Oh, yeah. So this is Animals First on the 2nd, and the 2nd day of every month. Activists around the world fast for 24 hours in recognition of how animals who have been driven to be killed are starved for at least that amount of time, so that they are weaker, they don't produce as much excreta and therefore inconvenient mess for their oppressors to clear up. It's just kind of, yeah.
And also costs to save on costs.
Yeah. So you don't have to feed the animals for at least the whole day, do you? Exactly. So yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, I'll ask you later.
Oh no, I was just going to say that. So we fast. We started at midnight and we continue on until midnight tonight. And yeah, we have this symbol that's synonymous with this. Is supposed to. This represents a plate with a knife and fork crossed to show that we kneel by mouth effectively, and it's kind of gaining a lot of momentum, I would say.
Apart from being obviously an act of solidarity, has also a practical side to it. For example, having this on your hand and going to your place of work is obviously a conversation starter.
Yeah,
or
definitely.
Going,
People do ask you about it, and it just gives you another opportunity to talk about animal oppression. But also sharing online is a big part of it, and I think it shows conviction, and people they realize that you're serious if this is something you'll do every month. And you know, it's something that everyone can identify with, isn't it? That going without food and water and how that feels. So yeah, I think it makes people take you more seriously in some ways.
When you're showing these things online, Hannah and Carl, do you feel that you're breaking out of the vegan bubble? Do you get reaction from non-vegans as well, or do you sometimes think on social media, because this is something that we often think about here, is that are we getting out of the bubble? Are other people who need to see this seeing this? I
mean, we obviously always want to get out further than we maybe do some of the time, but definitely I get messages from people who aren't vegan saying I've seen this and it made me think, or I also look through all the likes and comments on my posts, and if there's ever a comment from someone who I know to be non-vegan, I'll be right in there with a message to them afterwards. So I see it as an in. If they've liked it, that's an in to a conversation.
Yeah, every opportunity seized. and of course fasting's been used for protest. You know, people go on hunger strike often in prison, don't they? Fasting's often been used as a form of protest, and of course Barry Horn sadly lost his life as kind of becoming ill from hunger strikes in protest. And I suppose does it feel like a form of resistance and protest when you're doing it? And today's the day, of course, you're actually in it right now. How does it feel, you know, to be doing it? Does it feel?
I think it does kind of fine tune your senses, your connection becomes more acute. So you're more focused on why you're doing it. Yeah. And so, yeah, we mentioned solidarity, but one, of course, we can never begin to understand what the real victims are going through when they're starved this way. But it does make you start to question everything you took for granted when feeding yourself in this life of relative luxury that we've led. And it just kind of, I mean, meet the victim in a different way. It just gives you the extra motivation to push on. And when you see other people sharing their stories as well, it definitely bolsters your outlook.
Yeah, I think it is a struggle to go, not without food so much, but and not everyone gives up water. But to me, it's important to give up water as well, because the animals don't get any water, and it's only one day. But towards the end of the day, it is a struggle, and it just gives you a tiny sense of what they must be feeling.
Yeah, I've done food fasting, but I've never done the water, and yeah, it must be really challenging, because even now thinking about not having water, I feel really thirsty. I'm like, even just that psychological, not knowing that you're not having it. Yeah.
But the first one's the hardest psychologically. Hannah encouraged me to get started. I think this is your seventh now, right? And I was admittedly reluctant to start at first. I guess I was just being overly cynical and thinking to myself, oh, well, who's going to... Oh, sorry?
And eating around me while I was doing it.
Yeah, before I did it, I would shamelessly eat copious amounts in front of Hannah. I wouldn't like rub it in her face, of course. I'm not a complete sadist, but I was quite indifferent, admittedly. And then Hannah kind of encouraged me to get involved and to take it on. And then after the first event, you just realize, oh, I can do that. And it's like a milestone, and you can grow physically and mentally when it comes to finding like the wherewithal to just go about your day.
Yeah, I can't imagine not doing it now. To me, if there's something that could change somebody and you can do it easily once a month, just do it. It's the 22nd one I've done now, and I can't imagine stopping.
So the Liberation Pledge. Actually, I wanted to talk about this on the show for a very, very long time, and I really hope you're happy with that. What I'm going to say is not a critique. I've taken the Liberation Pledge. I'm wearing the fork, so it's not meant in any way to put you on the spot. The reasons I personally did it had everything to do with animals and making clear why I'm abstaining from abusing animals, and also starting conversations about animal oppression with other people. But lately, I've read some critiques about it, in the sense that maybe I'm making myself look better than other vegans who probably cannot do it because of the nature of their work, for example. So, what are your thoughts? Because I wanted to talk with activists that are wearing the fork.
I don't agree with that at all. I don't think it's about trying to look better than anybody else. So otherwise, we'd never do anything. And also, it's about adapting it to your circumstances. So, yes, different people have different jobs which make different challenges, but there's always a way around it. And, you know, we talk about this after events a lot, and everybody always has their own way around it. And if you genuinely have to sit there when someone is eating animals, then the simple thing is that you don't eat, and you say why you're not eating, and then you eat later, and then you are still fulfilling the pledge. So I don't think there's really a case where people can't do it. Obviously, it's more challenging at certain times, but to me, you have a duty to speak up. That oppression is happening in front of you, and either you say, no, I'm not going to sit there and be a part of it, which to me is the right thing to do. But if you don't, you've got a duty to say something every time, and that's a confrontation that most of us don't want. If you say nothing, then you're normalizing the oppression.
Yeah, and you walk away from that and you're kind of wrestling with your own guilt as to why you're not speaking up enough. And it's a harder thing to take on, to have to live with. And we've got friends, you know, and their workplaces, they deal with it in a very kind of professional way, and their colleagues understand. I mean, I know it's not always the case, but it doesn't have to turn into a full-blown confrontation. You just state clearly your motivation.
In fact, I'd say it's less confrontational generally, because you say exactly what your position is before, when you first meet people, or if you had a meeting, or if you were going for dinner with somebody, you tell them your position beforehand, so it's already resolved. And in terms of having conversations, if those people have agreed to come out and eat vegan with you, it's much easier to have the conversation than when they've got the victim in front of them.
I've done that recently. I've done it with friends, like before when we've been invited out with non-vegan friends. When I've been invited out, I've actually said I feel uncomfortable being around people who are consuming other animals when I'm spend my life fighting for their liberation. And it's actually opened up a conversation, and it's been really helpful to have those people understand it a little bit more and actually be very accommodating and say, oh, right, you know what we'll do, we'll go for a walk, or we'll do this, or we'll all eat plant food, animal free food. So it has really helped to open conversations. But I think for me, like you were saying first, Hannah, it has to be each time. It's a case by case thing in how do I approach this situation in this particular context right now with these people, rather than exactly. So it's open-ended.
On Facebook, a Liberation Pledge group for people to get support from each other as well if you need it.
Yeah. And the critique was not so much about not eating with others who consume animals. It was about using the fork as a symbol. What do you think about that? I mean, making in some way visible on your body.
That it's visible, because that's what starts the conversations, isn't it? I mean, people ask me all the time. I had the conversation with someone in Lush the other day because she asked me about my fork, and I did a full outreach to her after that. And if that fork wasn't on my arm, then that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it symbolizes inverting this aspect of life that we all take for granted, to bend it and to make us. I mean, it's almost an abstract statement. It's almost like a sculpture. You see that fork bent, and it's turning everything on its head. And yeah, the more curious among us will ask questions about it.
Deb was saying the pledge is based upon people in ancient China protesting against the binding of female children's feet.
Yeah, I learned that recently.
Oh, I didn't realise that,
Also, wasn't it the case that families wouldn't marry, they wouldn't allow their sons to marry into a family where that had
to
been...
stop it happening, they would say if they've done it, then they wouldn't allow their sons to marry them, and it stopped the practice. Yeah.
So I think we've got one slide left. Finishing on a happy note, I think. Come on.
It might go too.
It's changed on this computer, but not on this one yet.
I can't see it now.
No. It takes a bit of time, but it doesn't use it. There you go.
Oh, I don't think that is the last
one. I love the retreat. What an amazing place.
Yeah. It's just about supporting sanctuaries, really, and that is also a form of activism. And you know, people who say they can't do activism, there are all forms of activism that are needed. And that this was a specific day organised by some other activists from Reading. That we had speeches and everything, but helping on sanctuaries is another brilliant thing to do.
Yeah, and it really hit me actually. Noel and I were at a book club the other day with Vine Sanctuary, and the book was Saving Animals, I believe it's called. And the whole book is about sanctuaries and different elements of sanctuaries. But one thing that really struck me, because I've always thought, helping at a sanctuary is a form of activism, but it really struck me why the other day when we were going through this book. And for me, it really hit me that it's because it's our way that these relationships that we're having with other animals is a form of resistance, because we're resisting the normative paradigm of the relationships that the rest of the world have with these other animals. And it just suddenly hit me, of course, it's the relationships. It's not the fact that you're going there to like see them or care for them or anything. It's actually just having those different interactions and going there with that respectful attitude and greeting these individuals as the survivors they are, and trying to really foster that respectful attitude in yourself for them, rather than being the savior or the voice for the voiceless or all of that stuff. It's no, these are individuals who have, you know,
doesn't it, that you are doing it for those individuals.
Sorry, Hannah, say that again.
Sorry, I said it reminds you why you're doing everything you do.
And
it's good for your mental health as well, because instead of just seeing all the horrific things, you're going and seeing the ones that have been able to be helped.
Absolutely. It's really great for self-care, isn't it? They just being in that environment really just fills, well, personally speaking, it just fills you with such joy and replenishes you in ways that you can't get in other other ways. It's just being around those individuals is incredible. I find it. So friend open day this Sunday, Jeremy is saying as well.
Yeah, these places are very much the definition of grassroots, because, and sorry if I'm just retreading old ground, but you know, without these animals who have been taken out of that system, I mean, what in some areas of activism, what else are we fighting for? I know that we don't just advocate for those who are used for food and whatnot, but if these places didn't exist, there'd be nothing to fall back on, like, argumentatively and practically, for those who do kind of slip through and get out of there, like Jensen there in the black sheep on the right.
Giant Jensen.
Yeah, Jensen. Yeah. And if you're
I remember what. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if you're lucky enough to go to one like the retreat, and we on that day we had a tour with Billy, and we spoke to some of the other workers, volunteers there. They can just give you some insight into the stories of how animals ended up there, and it just kind of brings it all to life, and you just get lost in some. So he has so many. Billy, for example, has so many stories, and he's just so open and so
fascinating.
Yeah, he's a really classy, down to earth guy who I'm sure appreciate you saying that. But
he's amazing, and the fact that he knows all individuals by their names and remembers their stories. He has a personal relationship with every one of them.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
You see that?
I remember when he first started before it was the retreat, I remember him starting his very first sanctuary in his back garden. Like back in the day. Yeah. And then it just kind of grew, and then had to get premises, and I think maybe this was the second premises, I'm not sure, but yeah, they moved a couple of times and expanded, and now they're obviously huge. So yeah, Billy's amazing.
That shows how bold a form of activism it is, because you know, sometimes but adopting a dog or a cat, that can sometimes seem like a massive undertaking, because you don't want to let them down and giving them the life that they deserve. But for someone to do that with a sheep or a pig or a cow, and just think, right, I'm going to make this happen, that gives you some insight into his mindset initially. It's very impressive.
Yeah.
This slide's a little less happy, unfortunately. So these are all taken at Vigils. So there's Guildford and Farnborough and East London Chicken Save on there, but equally important, I'd say.
So you go there and you never feel quite so powerless as when you're at a vigil or a slave, and sometimes you're fortunate enough, based on the efforts of the activists who do stop the lorries and liaise with the staff to witness those animals' last moments. And it's brutal, spiritually, like psychologically, and it's similar to the Meet the Victims. Those, when you share these events with people out there, they see that you recognize those victims and you need to be there. And that should make them wake up to how this isn't just you sharing images online. It's you kind of.
These are the real victims,
right?
These are the victims, and we're standing there, wishing we could help them.
And also, I think that every activist that has been at least one vigil, and they have locked eyes with the. With the animal that goes inside, they can never forget it. I mean, then it becomes a lifelong commitment.
It's very much like that, going to Meet the Victims as well. You look them in the eye, and there are certain individuals who I made a connection with that I will never forget, and you just, yeah.
And it's about urgency, and this slide we're looking at now, this refers to one specific event, as I'm sure people know. With the middle picture, there was a cow who was deliberately rammed several times, I believe, by Thames Valley Police, cow who had managed to escape from the facility she was in. And with MBR, obviously, it's going happening over a much longer course of time, but it's still kind of this specific area, and people have kind of rallied around. And with the middle one, it was more short notice, but again, with MBR, people are kind of on standby because they get calls. I understand that perhaps people are trying to sneak the dogs out, and people kind of are turning up and giving it the backing it deserves. So it's just about how sometimes there's an incident and people just need to drop what they're doing. I think Mel Broughton made this point well. You drop what you're doing because you know that, one, you're going to regret it if you don't, but two, it's just that it demands that of you. You know it might not happen again, and if you don't do anything about it, you might not be able to kind of give it the strength, the support for the other activists that is required.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this slide was about, really, that we all have the things that we do day to day, and that they're our main activism, but when there's something that you need to do, if you can, just go, really. You know, the first one you can't maybe see as well. I picked that one because Wendy's hiding in the background. But the Russell protest. So yeah, there's that, and then the vigil for the cow that was rammed, and then MBR. So yeah, obviously keep doing the activism you do day to day because that's important. But if something else comes along and you're able to, just get there, even if it is short notice, like with the cow one that you saw. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Really, really good point. Because some things you just can't predict. And I think that's how MBR, actually, just speaking of MBR, I think that's how it's grown, because people have just, even one of the locals there was saying yesterday how she's lived down the road for years and knew nothing about MBR Acres. And it wasn't until the activists were standing outside, just a couple of activists with a sign, and then it started growing and she became aware of it. And now she's there every day with giving her support and speaking up, and she's bringing people along. And so it's just growing now because of that. So, and people just dropping things and just turning up and staying for a few hours or camping a night, or that, you know, just coming and going as and when they can. Yeah,
I've only been doing activism a short time, but in that period, that this is MBR's event where I've seen kind of people just gravitating more rapidly and just kind of giving up their time and energy so devotedly than in many other instances. It says a lot.
Yeah. Wow, you two are really a powerhouse of activism. It's been great to talk about all these different sort of diverse forms of activism. Never a dull moment. But no, it's brilliant, and I really hope that's helped to sort of inspire people to get involved more, to kind of think about these issues and maybe try different styles and different forms of activism, and also just each day looking at what you can do every single day to just, you know, whether it's the pledge, whether it's the fasting, just conversations, turning up to an event randomly because it's just been asked for, you know, all of these things are so important, and things that we can just do every single day.
Yeah, definitely.
So if people want to get in touch with you and join you at your the events you organize, where they can find you?
So we have We Stand for the Animals Facebook page, and there's contact on there. Yeah, and I will be putting a call out for anyone else that wants to organise in different areas in a couple of months or so. For the memorial, that is, I should have said, yeah.
So we've got one little item which is a bit different, really, and let's hope the technology will play. It'd be interesting to see what Carl and Anna make of this one. This is it's an audio from Jennifer and she had a dream about ringing up slaughterhouses. So she woke up one day and started to do it. And so this is one audio that that kind of accrued. There's a couple of audios. Let me see if I can get this on the screen. So let me know if you can hear the audio. It is 6 minutes, so people will have to listen, unfortunately, for a while. But it is quite interesting. Jeremy, you'll be quite interested to see what this guy that Jennifer's talking to says about halfway through, I think. So let's see if you can hear it.
Hello, is this like an abattoir, yeah?
No. Who are you after, sorry?
Oh, well, what is this like a kind of butcher's or what is it?
No, it's a deboning factory. So we debone beef here. We're not a slaughterhouse. Are you looking for, because we have a little trade counter attached to this premises?
Yeah, I'm really just looking to speak to someone who kind of, I suppose, I suppose I wanted to speak to someone who's part of this whole kind of system of, killing animals, for bones or whatever it is, meats or.
No, you're probably best to talk to an abattoir then, I would say, about that. Slaughter animals here at all.
Do you, can I just ask you, do you find it morally okay what goes on?
Do I personally find it morally okay?
Yeah, because I mean you are part of it, that's for sure. I mean you don't have to be actually on the kill for it. So I just kind of wanted to speak to someone who was connected to this kind of thing as opposed to growing crops or whatever. That way. Could I? Yeah. So if you don't mind, could I just ask? Or?
Yeah. Well, personally, look, it's a job for me, but personally, no, I don't. I'm not really an advocate of the mass slaughter of animals, but I also need a job.
Would you? Yeah. Would
sound slightly conflicted, but no, I don't really agree with slaughtering living things on a Holocaust scale.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. No, it's good to hear you say that. Because I'm actually an animal rights advocate, and I just wanted to kind of ring up a few of these places and just find out, just to have a little chat. Like I'm not here to right? Yeah, I'm not here to have a go. Yeah.
That's really all I'm willing to say. No, I'm not. I do have some humanity in me.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly good to hear. I suppose there are other ways. Because I suppose once if we stay doing these kind of jobs, I suppose it just makes the business even better, doesn't it? I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, look, if I could find something, that wasn't this type of business, I would do it. But for the moment, this is where I'm at. So we're kind of at the very end of the process. But I certainly just say I wouldn't personally work in a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
In the actual slaughterhouse itself, I wouldn't do that. Now I know I'm still kind of part of it, but I have to put food on the table and clothes on my back.
All right.
So yeah.
All right. Well, I suppose there's not much more I can say then. Yeah. I mean, I think.
I know it's a moral quandary.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to change anytime soon unless the human race en masse decides to start eating plant-based things. That's, I think the slaughter of poor old cows and pigs and whatnot is going to go on for long after we've shuffled off.
But I think the whole plant-based scene is certainly growing. I am actually vegan myself, and it really is growing.
Well, my wife's a vegan.
Oh wow, is she? Oh then.
So there you go.
Oh God, well there you go. That's absolutely excellent to hear that. Wow, yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm not vegan myself, and I'm not really vegetarian, but I rarely eat vegan. I wouldn't say I was vegetarian, but it'd be very rare that I eat any animal products, to be honest with you.
Oh right. Oh right. Okay. So that's actually a good sign. That means
I would if I was at someone's house and they were cooking things and they put a chicken in front of me, I would probably eat it out of manners. But I wouldn't go out and myself. I rarely eat meat. I rarely eat anything with a parent, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that certainly sounds like you're kind of starting to kind of see the whole kind of point of view that I'm trying to.
Oh, I totally understand. Don't worry about that. I completely understand where people come from because of vegan or vegetarian.
Well, it's very interesting to talk to you then, because I kind of expected the opposite. I kind of expected you to start getting kind of like funny with me because I'm a vegan and I'm trying to put an end to the slaughter, but look,
fight's a good fight, and things may change sometime in the future, but it's going to be a tough battle for you, I think. I know veganism and vegetarian is growing, but stopping abattoirs and things like that, it ain't going to happen in your lifetime or mine.
Well, I suppose even if it doesn't, I actually wouldn't be able to take part in it. I would just find it so gruesome and such bad energy that I just couldn't. But I'm not. No, again, this isn't me having a go at you. I'm really just saying that this is. That this is why I'm vegan. Yeah, this is why I just want to be as far away from it as possible, if that makes sense.
I completely understand.
Well, it was lovely to talk to you. I'm glad that you have a vegan wife and that you're kind of seeing, that you are certainly seeing it from this point of view, because we're just trying our best.
Battle away. The more you raise awareness, chip away.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Thanks for the conversation. Thank you.
No worries. Okay.
Goodbye. Take care.
Interesting conversation.
On multiple levels. You see, when he said those, I don't eat anyone with a parent.
Yeah, that stood out.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nara, I cut off there.
I just want to say that this is something that comes up quite often in the street. These people that at least claim that they consume very little and very rarely, but they won't take the final step, or they will congratulate you for fighting the good fight, but they're not willing to do it. I mean, it reminds me a lot of an outreach conversation. Obviously, when you bring someone who has not agreed on this call, you cannot use the arguments you would use in the street.
I still think you could have said a bit more, though. You could have said, well, why is it that you chose to cut out animals, the ones that you have? Why is it that you say you only eat a little bit? Is it because you know it's wrong, that kind of...
She's already...
You can still be polite, but you don't have to... You can still hold them accountable, I'd say.
She's already showed the boldness to initiate that exchange. I mean, a lot of people, myself included, would kind of feel apprehensive about cold calling, as it were, not knowing who you're going to speak to or what their reaction will be. So she's kind of done the hardest part, and she was close because she was saying, "Oh, I wouldn't want to be involved in this kind of thing myself." So she was kind of alluding to it, but that was too indirect, and it's given the man the wriggle room he needed to get out of it, when she could have, like you said, just firmly but
talking about bad energy as well. I think you should be talking about the victims. You can still, could have still used the same sort of language, but bad energy, I don't think that's really what it's about.
Jennifer's saying, because she's in the chat, she's saying it's only my first time. and she was terrified
to be honest, I'm interested to know how many you called to get that conversation, because you're saying that you wouldn't want to call up for fear of what they would say, but I would just assume that most of them would put the phone down.
Yeah.
It shows, I'm not just blowing smoke, as it were, it shows ingenuity, and and she's covering all those areas, and when he brought up his wife, that was a massive point to kind of focus on, and she did, Jenny, refer back to that. So I was thinking all the time that it was similar to the conversations you'd have at AV.
Yeah. I'm just thinking what I would say. So I'd be interested to know if Jennifer's done any street activism.
Well, I can answer that. The answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. I was thinking about the wife as well. I was thinking, how do you feel as a partner of someone who is a deboner?
Not
how
taking
does
the
that
liberation pledge, presumably.
No.
How does that work? Yeah, how do you cope with that?
Well, that's a whole other conversation, isn't it? Because you'll get people who describe themselves as vegan who will then cook the bodies for their partners. So you would assume that it's somebody like that.
As far as he's concerned, although he's talking about having less dead bodies on his conscience, he still has that barrier in place where there are commodities whereby he will eat chicken who's put in front of him at a social gathering.
Out of manners.
But I feel like that's the reason to push it. He obviously has someone around him who realizes it's wrong, and someone else has phoned him up and telling him that he's doing the wrong thing. And if you just give him a little bit more of a push, that could be all that's needed. You know, just a little few tweaks in the language, and you're still being polite, but you're holding them accountable just by asking them questions. So,
and just the point I made before, she's obviously got the strength to do that. So that's what activism is about. Just there's no one fixed kind, and if you have certain skill sets, certain level of confidence, you can do that. Then it just goes to show you found something that works. And I applaud the effort. Not the effort. It sounds patronising, but just doing that in the first place. There's so much potential there and so much ground that was covered in that conversation.
Yeah, it's the same with anything you do. The more you do it, the more confident you get, and perhaps you'll get pushed a little bit more next time. Keep phoning the same man every week.
They say that with advertising, don't they? That if you don't advertise something once, you advertise to the same person like 20 times, and eventually after about 18 times, it's like, oh, suddenly the penny drops. So you have to keep going back to the same people over and over.
Right. Especially if you've got a vegan partner, as someone just said, that hearing it from someone else could just be the extra push that they need, because often it's harder to hear stuff from the people you're close to, and if you've just got someone else saying the same thing to you, then maybe you'll think a little more.
Jennifer's asking, does Hannah ring up slaughterhouses?
No, I've never rung up a slaughterhouse. I would assume they'd put the I mean, what's the aim? Is it just to have a general outreach conversation, or did you have another aim in mind?
Well, I think it was similar to an AV thing where you're obviously talking to an individual about animal use and that. And so I think it was like that. But I think what inspired it was a vivid dream that she had.
Oh, yes, I did say that, yeah.
Another thing that came to mind when I was listening to this is how powerful the statement "I'm vegan" is. Because there are some people that they are living vegan but don't identify as vegan, and I was thinking that it's a powerful statement.
Definitely.
It's very different. I mean, you may not oppress anyone with the way you are living, but if you don't make the statement, there is something missing.
I mean, not consuming or using animals is just the baseline, isn't it? Actually speaking up and telling people about it is what you need to do. Yeah, however you do it, whatever works for you.
And sometimes in a way, it's not always what they're going to hear in the conversation. It's the fact they've even had the conversation at all, isn't it? It's they'll create their own narrative around it. And if he's already got things going on, the seeds being planted, no matter what Jennifer would have said in that conversation, he's going to have his own conversation in his own mind anyway. That's going to go on. So if he's already got those seeds, he could be thinking. He could really be thinking about it.
The questions, though, asking the questions to make him think about those things for himself rather than just saying it to him.
Yeah, because it's still never our job to make people vegan. If you know you've asked certain questions, you've done all you can to speak up on behalf of someone else.
Yeah,
that's your job.
It's not about what they say; it's about what you say. Have you said the best thing you could have said to speak up for the victim? You can't do anything about how they react. You can only know that you've done the best you can.
I think Gariowski does a good bit about that in these best ways to spread veganism video. It's only about 3 minutes, but he says stuff along the lines of, don't be a politician. People are either ready or they're not. You can be as softly spoken as Gandhi says, or be like early Malcolm X. That was the comparison he made. And people are either going to take on board or they're going to fight you all the way. And yeah, people, you know, Jenny and many like her have got the tools to do just that.
Yeah, so long as you know that you've spoken up, that's all you can do.
Well, on that lower note, shall we call this to an end? It's
Brian's telling me, he's looking at me like you're late.
It will be at this stage. Yeah, this is one of the longest shows we've ever had, I think. So, well done for all your activism.
Yeah, well done both.
It was very inspiring today. Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
You actually proved that one can do many different kinds of activism, that there is some kind of activism that fits everyone.
Right.
It was very interesting and very inspiring. Thank you for
being
here.
for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. Really appreciate your time. Probably takes your mind off of not having any food or water for a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, actually.
It's just a few hours to go.